Probably the most common misconception that I run into about communication skills is that they fall into the basket of things that are soft and warm and fuzzy, but don't actually have a real impact on our ability to get stuff done. Well, today I want to address that myth, and I'm going to talk about how improving my communication skills genuinely has supercharged my productivity. First, we'll look at the scientific evidence, then I'll talk about the 5 ways that better communication skills have really improved my productivity as an emergency physician. Okay, so what does the academic literature have to say about the effect of communication skills on productivity? Firstly, there's this paper which showed that doctors who respond effectively to patient cues were able to complete their consultations on average 2.5 minutes more quickly than doctors who ignored the emotional cues of their patients. Then there's this review article which collated data from a number of different studies to show that building rapport, negotiating a shared negotiating a shared agenda, and responding to patient cues were associated with not only increased patient satisfaction, but yes, you guessed it, greater efficiency. And finally, this review is one of a growing number of papers that demonstrates the link between doctor communication skills and better patient outcomes. So what does all this show? It shows that if you improve your communication skills, the people are going to like you more, you're going to get more done, and you're going to have better outcomes in terms of the goals and tasks that are set before you. Now, this literature is all obviously set within the medical context, but there is no reason why these rules and principles wouldn't apply outside that context. So what's my experience in applying these principles to my work in the emergency department? The first thing to say is that I am more efficient in my conversations with patients, but without sacrificing rapport. I put this down to a series of key elements. Firstly, I talk less, but I can guide the conversation with more finesse. Secondly, I'm able to gather information that is more relevant and more accurate and more complete, and I'm able to do that more rapidly. Thirdly, because I have better information, I'm able to make better decisions, and I'm able to make those decisions earlier and with greater confidence. Finally, when I give information to patients and their families, I'm able to give that information in a way that is more likely to stick the first time. And the fact that they've retained that information means it's much less likely that they're going to run into trouble in the future and potentially have to represent to the emergency department. So the second thing I want to highlight about improving my communication skills is that these days I seem to suffer less from something called attention residue. Now, what is attention residue? In his book, Deep Work, Cal Newport shows that people are less productive when they're continually moving from one task to another compared to if they just focus on one task at a time. Now, he attributed this decreased efficiency to the fact that when moving rapidly between tasks, at least part of your attention remains on the previous task, even as you address the new one. This is attention residue. So what has this got to do with communication skills and my productivity in the emergency department? Well, because my communication enables me to make better decisions with greater confidence, I'm able to clear the slate of my mind between patient interactions, knowing that I have a safe plan in place. With my full attention on the next task in front of me, I'm also able to be more efficient at that. Another important point is that improving my communication skills has meant that I'm better able to negotiate disagreements and avoid conflict, meaning that I spend much less time ruminating over interactions that might have gone wrong. All of this means that I tend to have more time with my mind relatively clear of distractions and ruminations and thoughts, with more cognitive space and cognitive power to dedicate to whatever the task is in front of me at that moment. This wasn't always the case. I used to think about stuff way too much and let it bother me and let it sort of distract me from what I had to do. But I really have found that improving my communication has made a huge difference to this. The third thing that I want to say about improving my communication skills and my productivity is that I'm able to develop more trust and I'm able to develop it more quickly. More quickly. Is that a real phrase? I'm not sure if that's a real phrase, but I hope you know what I mean. So what is the typical model of an emergency department consultation? Here is how I see it. You meet, usually for the first time, you have a discussion, you have to agree on a plan. And depending on what the patient is presenting with, that plan could include going home, it could include being admitted to hospital, and it could include some kind of procedure. Now, if you have the patient's trust, basically all of that happens much more quickly and much more easily. The fourth benefit that I've found from improving my communication skills is that these skills translate across to how I deal with my colleagues. Improving my communication skills has meant that it's pretty rare that I have suboptimal interactions with my colleagues. This has meant that I'm able to lead and delegate more effectively without appearing bossy, which always used to be a big concern of mine. And it's also meant that my interactions with other specialties within the hospital are much more efficient and amicable, even when we disagree on something. And again, this wasn't always the case. I used to have real trouble with this sort of thing, and maybe not so much get into arguments, but I used to get really quite affected by disagreements and not feel like I had the skills to navigate them. That seems to be different these days. The fifth thing I want to say is that because communication skills make everything just a little bit easier, it means that I'm less stressed and I have more cognitive capacity for work. So these days I see more patients, I enjoy my job more, and when I get home at the end of the shift, I feel less stressed and exhausted. So what's the take-home message? An investment in your ability to communicate well could have a greater impact on your productivity and enjoyment at work than any other single skill set. I went to the trouble of putting some real time and effort into trying to improve my skills in communication, and I found that it's paid off massively. It's been incredible for every aspect of my life, professionally and personally. Now, if you like this video and you got some value out of it, and you can think of at least one person who could benefit from it, why not share it with them? Often the people who need this stuff the most are the people who are least inclined to engage with it unless they're introduced to it by a friend. You could be that friend. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.